So in this video, I want to talk to you guys really quickly about why I decided to sell almost all of my possessions. I got rid of my car, got rid of my apartment, and got rid of a lot of the things that people look forward to purchasing, especially when you live in a city like I did in Los Angeles. And I think that that decision to get rid of almost all of the things I owned and now live out of a suitcase here in Bali and maybe continue to travel once the borders open up was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Now, about 6 months ago is when I actually made that decision, and now that I've had some time to experience what it's like to live out of a suitcase and not have anything dragging me back down and just tying me back to one location, it's given me a level of freedom that I've never really got to experience before. And that's why I want to share with you guys why I believe this is one of the best decisions I've ever made, the pros and cons of living out of a suitcase and not owning any expensive items, and my personal recommendations for you guys if you have ever thought about doing so. So with that said, let me tell you a little bit about the story behind why I decided to do so. Bro, whose idea was that? Oh, it's disgusting. Hello there. Well, let's dive into this story, I guess. In all seriousness, this story for me started when I got my very first job, because that was the very first time I realized that there was no way I was gonna work a regular job. I was working as a valet attendant and a host in a restaurant, and I realized that I needed more freedom in my life. That was around the same time that I also started to pursue options for self-employment, like working as a filmmaker and a photographer, and now starting my own business. But for me, that marks the day that I really started this dedicated pursuit to trying to gain as much freedom in my life as I possibly could, because before that point, I didn't really think about it that much. Now, when I had my first job, I obviously did the same thing that most people do in society, right? We buy all of these expensive things. I got myself a car, I was paying like $500 a month, got myself my first apartment, moved out of my parents' house, got a motorcycle, and started buying all these expensive things because I thought that I needed those things in order to be happy and live life the way that we're supposed to live life in society. Now, I did that for about a year until I picked up a pretty serious photography gig, and I did the same thing I actually just did a few months ago. I sold all my stuff, went and traveled for a year, but when I got back, I did the same thing all over again. I got all these expensive things, got an even more expensive apartment, an even more expensive car payment, and I got all of these things that I realized the second time around were just tying me down to one location, because I went from traveling for an entire year and then coming back home to realizing that I was now stuck in LA. I couldn't really leave. I had a $4,000 a month apartment. I had a $1,000 a month, car payment or whatever. And I had all these extra expenses that were tying me down. I also couldn't really leave because I was stuck on a year-long lease. The car payment was a year-long lease. I couldn't just leave and stop paying because I was stuck on a contract. Now, that's when I really started to think about maybe just getting rid of everything I had for good and moving out to a cheaper country, especially since that was around the same time that I started to make money online. Now, with that said, this was a really big conflict inside of my head, because part of me was saying, you need to live in LA. This is where everyone networks. You need to be here. You need to grow your business here because it's LA, right? The other half of me was saying, it doesn't matter. The only thing that really matters is the work that you put into your business. Nobody else really matters. And Bali and other places also have a pretty good creative and business community. So you'll probably be able to find just as cool of a group of friends in another country. So that was actually the time that I was writing this note down in my journal. This was actually in November 2019. And you can see that right here in my notebook, it says, I'm currently living in Hollywood at a new apartment because I thought I needed to be here in order to take the next step in life. Is this the right place? So far, it hasn't shown me any benefits. My other option is Bali. And at this point in time, I had that seed planted in my head. And I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that, when you have this thought that just keeps popping back up into your head and you just can't get rid of it. So I thought about it for 2-3 months, and if I look back at a few journal entries later, we go from November 2019 to February 2020, so that's only 2 months later, and the next journal entry says, I'm currently writing this as I sit on my first ever first-class seat to my new home base, Bali, Indonesia. Since reaching the self-employment and online business milestone that I set for myself years ago, I'm finally reaping the rewards and planning for what's next. Now, when I was sitting here on my way to Bali, I had absolutely no idea what was coming up. I didn't even have an Airbnb booked until I got to my layover in Singapore, 12 hours before I was supposed to arrive in Bali. So I really had no plan. I had no friends in Bali. I didn't know what to expect when I arrived in Bali. I'd been there a few times before, but I was just gonna show up with my suitcase, all the things that I still owned at that point because I got rid of my apartment, I sold my car, and I spent those 2 months in between getting rid of everything I owned so that I could come here with a clean conscience and not worry about anything. Now, this was back in February 2020, and it's been about 6 months since that time. It's now August. I can tell you right now at this point that this is one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. So let me break down why for you right now. First of all, the cost of living in Bali compared to Los Angeles is a huge bonus. To give you a clear picture, the apartment I was living in LA was about the same size as the one I have here in Bali. They're both 2-bedroom apartments, they're both modern, and they're both in prime locations. The only difference is price. The apartment I had in LA was about $3,600 per month, whereas the apartment here in Bali is only $800 per month. Not to mention, in LA, you're practically forced to own a car if you want to have any type of life, whereas living in an island such as Bali, everything is much closer, so you can just get around on a scooter. And the scooter I have right now cost me about $50 a month instead of the $500 per month I was paying for my car with all the added expenses like insurance, gas, and maintenance. So that alone is already a $3,250 savings per month. But the biggest benefit to me isn't only the money, it's the fact that I can just live life on the go. In most countries, if you want to live somewhere, you're practically forced to sign a 1-year lease for an apartment, a car, or any big purchase you want to make. In Bali, I pay for everything month to month. That way, I never have to worry about anything tying me down, and I can always leave somewhere new at any given second without having to worry about a thing. This single benefit for me right here, on top of the fact that my expenses are already way below my means, gives me the freedom to take bigger risks in my business. And what I mean by that is it allows me to outspend, outwork, and outdo my competition since I'm living on less than 10% of my overall income. And since my expenses are so low, I have so much more wiggle room to spend money on either hiring people, spending money on advertising, or just spending money on new materials for my business. And that's why I think getting in the habit of living below your means is super important if you want to start your own business, because no matter what you do, it's going to require an investment, and that money has to come from somewhere. So living below your means gives you an easy option to get the budget to do that. Now, another big bonus for me is the adventures you can do when you're not living in a city. When I was living in LA, it would take me about 30 to 45 minutes just to get from Hollywood to Santa Monica, whereas in Bali, I can be at the beach in 5 minutes, and then 30 minutes later, I can be at an insane waterfall. And if I want to cruise up to a volcano, I can rent myself a dirt bike for like $10 a day and go on a crazy adventure that same day as well. Now, last but not least, I would say the people here in Bali are also super amazing. Living in a big city, it's a pretty cutthroat dog-eat-dog world, whereas compared to Bali, it's a whole different world. The locals here are always super nice, they're always smiling, and they're always happy to help you out. And also, there's a huge community of filmmakers, photographers, and online entrepreneurs, since it's the perfect place to be if you're in any one of those fields. After arriving here completely alone only a few months ago, I've already met some of the best people I know, both personally as friends and also as partners in business. So with that said, that's my breakdown and comparison between the two and why I believe Bali was one of the best moves I've made this year. And of course, there are also some inconveniences like having to hold your groceries in one arm while you drive your scooter with the other. And they also don't have any big department stores here. But other than that, those are all just minor setbacks for me, and I still think it's a pretty big win. So as I take my sunset stroll here in Bali through the rice paddies, because that's what we do here in Bali, we take sunset strolls through rice paddies. All jokes aside, seriously, I hope you guys understand and maybe got some insight as to why someone might want to get rid of all these expensive liabilities and fly to another country on a complete whim. because in my personal experience, this has been one of the best decisions I've made this year. It was only because everyone else was doing all these things, getting these expensive apartments and getting these expensive cars, that I felt like I needed to do the same, when in reality, that was the one thing that was holding me back from getting the amount of freedom that I really wanted. So I hope this video gives you maybe a little bit more of a perspective on the different options that you can take, because in my case, these choices I've made suit my lifestyle a lot better than what most people would consider normal choices or a normal lifestyle. If you want to learn more about the online skills and the online business stuff that I mentioned, I do have a lot of paid trainings and free trainings on my website. I'll put that down in the description of this video. If you guys want more videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it, and it does help me out a lot. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.